Hi everyone, Alan from Newlands Pets. Hope you are well, and this is today's Ask Alan. We are getting so many questions in. This is episode 12, it's flown past, so loads and loads of questions answered already, so make sure you check back on past episodes, just because people are finding them quite interesting to look. So often what we find is people saying they're questions they didn't even think to ask. So it's really nice, and that was the main aim for us starting this. So let's get to the first question. Question 1, asked by Natalie: do dogs become more sensitive to bone content as they get older? So much is going to depend on the dog, but the reality is what we find is dogs actually can become more sensitive to bone at any point. So sometimes we find out a year, sometimes 18 months, sometimes before that or after that. But as they get older, obviously what you tend to find is that dogs do often become basically the same as us. They find it slightly harder to process things. So it is perfectly possible that your dog will become more sensitive to bone. And I think what Natalie means by this is sensitive bone, as in too much bone. So what you can do is reduce the amount of bone that the dog has. You can do that by adding a bit of bone-free mince in there, or by potentially looking at a food that has less bone in it to begin with. Question 2, what are some long-lasting chews? This is something we get asked all the time. Something we like people to bear in mind is that if you've got something that's really hard, let's take an extreme example that you wouldn't use, let's say concrete, then it's going to break your dog's teeth. So there's a happy medium. So what manufacturers do is look for something that's long lasting but isn't going to break your dog's teeth. So good examples of that are antlers, are yakkers, cow's ears for some dogs can last a long time as well. So that type of treat is absolutely ideal for a dog for a long lasting treat. And question 3, what is freeze-dried food? How is it made? And is it raw? So freeze-dried food is still classed as raw. And although it doesn't look like raw, as in you don't store it in the freezer, it is still classed as raw. It's made by drying it, and the nature of that is they freeze it down and take all the moisture out of it, and that's why it can last for a long time and be known as what is shelf stable, as in it is stable and doesn't go off on a shelf. It is still classed as raw because there's no cooking involved, because it's obviously freezing involved, but it's something that a lot of people are starting to feed, but it is still classed as raw. And that is the last question for today's episode. Thank you for everybody who got in contact with us and asked the questions. And remember, if you've got any questions at all, ask away. See you soon.